Today I want to look at a little job on my Adcock Shipley Mill, and it has to do with the gearbox. So this is in fact the gearbox for the feeds, and there are two levers on the end here which give me a total of 6 feeds. Now the problem is, ever since I've had the machine there's been an oil leak, and I've topped it up several times but the oil has just dropped. There's a problem somewhere. I haven't figured out where it is, so I'm going to take the lower half of the gearbox off so we can get in there and see what the problem is. It could just be the drain plug that's leaking, although I haven't noticed that much oil underneath. Okay, there's been a lot of moisture in here, isn't there? So yeah, it's good that I drain that oil out. I think what I'm going to do is give it a clean up outside, get rid of all this swarf and muck on the outside, and then I think I'm going to strip it down, just give it a good clean and put it back together again, and that'll give me a chance to have a look at everything. Hopefully that'll also give me a chance to sort out the filler gauge or the oil level gauge, which is dirty and just needs a good clean. Maybe it's got a couple of gaskets in there too which can be changed. So the reason I didn't take the primary shaft out is because to get that out it comes that way, and you've got to remove this universal joint which is pinned on, and I had a little go at it and this pin is in tight, and I thought to myself, well, if I can get the rest of it out without disturbing that, then I'll be happy. So that's why I'm cleaning this up in situ. Now it seems to me that water's got into this gearbox and that's what the rust is. So I'm really glad that I've taken this apart. Nothing too untoward, I don't think. Give this a good clean out, put some fresh oil in, sort out the sealing issues, and I think there are several sealing issues. I think it could do with some gasket sealing around the top here, but also on the end plates there was no gasket at all on there, and possibly also the oil level gauge. Now the quantity of rust makes me wonder if actually water's got into here. It's not just a question of condensation. So when I looked at the pulley at the rear of the machine, and that's in one of my previous videos, I discovered that the bearing there had it, and it looked to me as if water had got in there, and I wondered if the machine had been standing in a location where water had fallen onto the back of the machine, and I wonder if somehow it got into here as well. After I've done this gearbox, I'm going to have a look at the main gearbox as well, which I've not touched. Changed oil, but I've not actually opened it up. So I've removed as much as I can from the gearbox, including the gear change handles, all the other mechanisms, and there's just this one shaft left. Now, I was thinking that I would cover this up with tape and plastic sheet, sand down the outside and repaint it, but the inside has rusted, and I'm wondering if I ought to repaint the inside too. That I really do need to get this gear cluster out. So there's a taper pin here. I've carefully identified which is the smaller end and which is the bigger end, so I'm trying to hammer it out from the smaller end. I made this little drift which is just big enough to not to go over the edge of the smaller end. I've made a bit of an impression. I can feel it sunk slightly, but I'm not getting very far. As you can see, I've supported the shaft on this bolster here, try and get the maximum input to the pin. Being very careful not to go over the edge. I don't want to pin the end of this. I finally decided that trying to drive this out with a hammer and a homemade punch just wasn't going to work. Well, this is my setup for drilling out the taper pin. I've clamped the body of the gearbox down, one clamp on the front and this clamp on top. Originally I was going to try and clamp the shaft, but I realised there's no need to. I've clamped the gear cluster, so that will stop the rotation. And what I've done is measure either side, line up with the centre of the pin using my calipers, and then measuring from the edge of the drive shaft to the centre on both sides, and the centre of the taper pin, and getting the shaft vertical. So everything's locked up. I've got a fine drill in there to pick up the centre pop, and we're going to start drilling that out. I hope, anyway. I made a little punch from silver steel or drill rod. It's not hardened, and I've left this diameter here just slightly smaller than the small diameter of the taper pin. This is a nice fit in the drilled hole. It doesn't really have to be long like that. I don't think it's realistic to expect this to press on the bottom of the hole, although I do think that applying the force as close to the large diameter of the pin is better, but that's just not going to work. So ignore the length of it. It's just a location to make sure that I center the punch. So I've also packed up the spindle on here, so we should have a nice firm setup. So despite as much hammering as I dare do on this really small pin, there is some movement on this end, on the small end. You can see that demarcation there, that outer diameter is clearer than it was, and ever so slightly it's sunk beneath the surface, but not very much. That pin is well and truly seated. This is the reverse side, and although you can just see where the pin is, it's definitely not moved. So that's well and truly stuck. So what I'm going to do now is center punch as best I can on the center of that pin. This is the larger diameter, and drill down as far as I can. Hopefully that will relieve the stress on the pin, and we can tap it out from the other side. Well, eventually I ended up drilling all the way through, which I was hoping to avoid because of the danger of running off center and either cutting into this bush or the shaft. But there's the only way I could get it to move, and finally it started to move. So I've made this new drift, which is just under the smaller diameter, and hopefully we can finally push the pin out. There we are. It's out. Great. Let's see what damage we've done. We broke through on one side, but I think we can yeah, it looks like I can run a reamer through there. I'm going to have to run a reamer through there anyway when I fit a new pin, so I think that's not too bad. Hopefully this will come off. Just taking another look at the tapered pin, and you can see on the end there that it's where it's bright. I think you can see that. That indicates to me that what was happening was that as I was hammering on the end here, what it was doing was actually spreading the pin, and that was just making it tighter in the hole. So yeah, definitely hammering from the end here seems to be a very inefficient way of removing these pins. The harder you hammer, the tighter they get. Anyway, drilling all the way through seems to be the way, but it's quite tricky on such a small diameter over that length, and also when you can't really, well, very easily anyway, on a setup like this, pick up the center line. Anyway, we've done it. Let's see if we can get this apart. Wow, look at that. Remarkably easy. Yeah, that wasn't what I was expecting. Looks like we can disassemble this now. Good. Good, we can do a proper job now of cleaning up the inside here, removing the flaking paint, and getting a good key for a coat on the inside there to keep the oil nice and clean. I can also clean out the oiling holes, and it also means that when I prepare the outside, I'm not going to be running the risk of leaving sanding grit in the machinery. Well, that took a lot longer than I was expecting. Well, this is actually a couple of weeks later. I've been able to come back and continue working on this. It took a lot of effort to clean out the inside of the casting and degrease it. I really could have done with a sandblasting cabinet, access to it, but I didn't have that. Anyway, I've got a coat in the side, on the inside there. I'll probably put another coat in there, and I am starting to work on the outside, so I've given it one coat of primer, which I'm going to rub down and then put some filler in. Whilst I'm doing that, I'm also working on a few other items, smaller items, and one larger item which I had put on one side some time ago, and that is the rear cover. So I've started to work on that too. I'm not going to show much of this online because I'm not really that, what can I say, equipped to do painting. I do it to my own standards. It's not a good example, I suspect, but I'm just using hand techniques, painting with a brush, rubbing down, and just hopefully get an acceptable finish. My main purpose is to try and get the right color, so I've used Paragon paints, and I think this is the right color, and a durable finish that isn't going to wear off or scratch or be affected by the oils I use on my machine. This is a one coat of Paragon primer, which they recommend to improve surface finish and provide a good key for the top coats. I've just gone over this with wet and dry, and certainly makes a lot of difference using a bit of water and detergent as compared with doing it dry. I tried dry to start with and it just clogs up very quickly. But yeah, I think this is making good progress. You can see some places I've gone right through to the bare metal again. I'm not sure whether to give this another coat of primer. Strictly speaking, I don't need primer on a good metal surface, but this is just really to improve surface finish as far as I understand. Now for the casting, the gear case, this had two coats of primer and 2 lots of filler, and I think this will be the final filler. This is just tidying up a few areas which the primer wasn't able to cover. I'm going to go over this again. I understand that if you're going to put filler on, it's better to have primer first, so that's why I started with the primer. I'm going to give this one more rub down, and hopefully all the components will be ready then for the final 2 or 3 gloss coats. Well, I was getting ready to put the gloss coats on the casting here. I think I've got an acceptable surface finish, and the other few components, and also the overarm bracket which I made in previous videos, which ended up the wrong color. And the reason for that is because I went for the name of the product. I thought this was Adcock and Shipley Bridgeport Cement Grey. Well, this may have been, but I thought my machine was. And it came out as totally the wrong colour. That was the colour I was looking for, and that was the colour I ended up with. So this time round, I ignored the name against the paint on Paragon's website, and I went for what I thought was the nearest colour. Of course, I was using the online colour on the screen on my computer, and I chose Colchester Lathe Dove Grey. So I've just applied the Colchester Lathe Dove Grey, and it looks like this, which isn't so different to my eyes anyway from the Adcock and Shipley Bridgeport Cement Grey. And of course what I'm really looking for is this. So what I've decided to do is to bring this video to a close, and I have sent off for the proper color chart, and that will hopefully enable me to select the right paint. So I'm going to continue this next video.